Right, Roy, thank you very much for inviting me around your house. So
No
cheers.
problem.
And,
Absolutely. There we go.
For an episode of Happy Hour. So first off, what are we drinking? I think I brought some IPAs. You said you were an IPA fan.
Yeah, India Pale Ale.
Yeah.
It's it covers a multitude of sins, really. There's a whole lot of, India Pale Ale. It can be quite light like this. It can be quite dark, etc., etc. So it's become more general in its label over recent years, particularly with some of those microbreweries that have started up, because there's so many that, not that I'm saying that's a bad thing, but IPA can tend to be a bit of a, well, what is that really? But this one's quite a fruity one actually.
Because when I went to pick them up, I was like, Chelsea, which one do I get? I was like, and I couldn't find exactly what I wanted. And it was just like so many designs on cans. I was like, this says classic IPA. I was like, that'll do.
Well,
so here we are.
It's doing the job.
So Roy, I want to ask, I think you mentioned it before, but obviously you flew the Phantom first.
Yeah.
And I think you said, if I'm correct, that you wanted to move on to the Tornado. Could you have actually stayed on the Phantom if you had a choice?
Yes, I think so. It's one of those things where there's what I wanted, what the Air Force needed. If I had refused and said, well, I really wanted to stay, because actually I'd been on 43 for about a year and a half, which is only half a tour, really. I'm sure they would have said, well, all right, we'll pick somebody else to go. To answer your question, I could have stayed. But as I say, I knew where the future was. Would I have liked longer on the Phantom? Yes, I would have done. But I wasn't going to pass up this bus that was going to take me on to the land of the F-3. Yeah. Because I didn't know when the next one was coming. That's the problem. In actual fact, the way things worked out, most of the guys on Phantoms that wanted to go ended up going over the next 5 or 6 years. So probably I would have got there.
Yeah, I was going to say, was the blokes who actually said, no, I don't quite want to go yet, and they stayed on the Phantom?
Yeah. To be honest, it's another factor in that whole soap opera of the Phantom Tornado changeover. Yeah. Where there was all sorts of, I don't know, the partisan lines set up, the problem with the jet not working as it should, as I mentioned when we were talking about Phantom F3, DACT, particularly in 1988, the F3 was not as good as the Phantom operationally, and that was disappointing. And what we also had were guys who didn't want to go at that time, but when they did arrive, and it must be said, a lot of this applies to the backseaters, because they had the biggest change in operating. Yeah. They didn't just have a radar screen, they had a radar screen and something else over here. Yeah. And there was a number of them, and it's got to be said, some of the more old and hairy types just took a long time to get into the new way of working and using this TAC display, which is effectively a plan display. I mean, they were used to just reading a radar, doing the stuff in their head, and working an intercept from there. And to get them to no, I don't need that. I've spent 10 years on a Phantom just using a radar screen. Don't give me another screen. It wasn't quite as bad as that, but they were. So point is, there was a lot of them took time to get up to speed. You then add in, the boys who are coming through training, who were never on the Phantom, right? And so they come to the F3, 88, 89, 90 sort of time scale, filled with mostly ex-Phantom aircrew who are dealing with an aircraft, and let's face it, when the navigators are talking about, they're talking about the radar, not as good as what they've just left. There was an awful lot of, when I was on Phantom, when we were on the Phantom. And what then happened was the young lads got really pissed off because they're on their new jet, and all they're hearing from the experienced boys is, this is rubbish, this is rubbish, this is rubbish, this isn't working. The RHWR's not working, the radar's not working, oh look, the engines are whatever. And they're saying, and so what they started to do was to stamp on people talking about the Phantom, because they kept saying, look, Phantom's gone. Right, forget Phantom, it's the F3, don't want to hear. And I don't know if you remember the film Monty Python and the Life of Brian and Jehovah. Right, nobody is to stone anybody, you know, but then I blow this whistle, even if they do say Jehovah, you know, and all.
Yeah.
So it became known as the Jehovah Jet.
Oh, right.
The Phantom.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, so they called it the Jehovah Jet, and you had the Jehovah Police, which were the young guys going round. The moment anybody started talking about Phantom, right, you can understand why it happened, because there was too much of the negative. But the problem was, it stayed, and we were called the dinosaurs because we were on from the Phantom, and it, you know, you can't move with the times. You know, you got to get on with it. But you fast forward to about 96, 97. Phantom's long gone. We've got a great jet that's getting better, but we still had the Jehovah Police. They were also called the Blah Jet. That was the other one. So you had the Blah Jet. It's the same thing. So you still had these boys, and they were actually training up new guys who had never suffered from this negative chat in the crew room that was prevalent in the late 80s. We're now getting towards the late 90s, and it's still going on. And what they didn't realise was all these guys had become the dinosaurs. They couldn't let it go. There's nothing, you know, we're not talking about the Phantom anymore.
Yeah.
We all accept that the F-3 was the way forward, but these guys are still going, oh, Blah Jet, oh, Jehovah, look these. And they would get young guys doing it, and I'd be thinking, why are you doing it? You don't know why you're doing it, but you're only doing it because Jimmy Smith did it.
Yeah.
And they became the dinosaurs because they couldn't let it go. And there was actually a more serious element to that, because we couldn't tell any stories that happened to be in Phantom days, because instantly they're jumping on you going, no. But in actual fact, you're missing out on good experience, as you're talking about in the crew room, on Happy Hour or whatever. And there's also some air safety bits that just happen to happen or be relevant when I was flying the Phantom. But the moment you open your mouth about on first tour on Phantoms, that was it. No, you can't. And it really became quite oppressive. And they failed to realise that that problem had long since gone.
Yeah. But
they just hung on to it, whether it was for fun or whether it just got ingrained. But they became the dinosaurs, really.
Yeah.
And it was strange. It took a long time until everybody then moved out, and then I don't know whether it's happened with the Typhoon or not, because of course it wasn't as slick an entry as it should have been to service. There was a lot of F-3 people coming in there that might have, I don't know. I haven't heard much. I think it was because there were more Jags and Harrier pilots coming in. I think there were probably a smoother transition, because they had a sort of more of a cocktail of experience, and it wasn't just one type moving to another type. But it was, don't get me wrong, I mean, we got the job done, but socially it did get irritating after a while, because you think, you don't know why that.
Well, these rules just enforced from the top, or was it just the aircrew saying or was it actually written down? This is a rule.
No. All right, it would have been when I say the kids, I mean the junior aircrew had developed this, and it just became part of the folklore. Right. And the older guys, and as I became, you know, and some of the other guys on the squadron who were ex-F4, we just had to suffer this, and we just, you know, it was certainly not official, don't get me wrong, and if we had formal ground training and we're having the air safety day, then there was none of that. What we're talking about is just sitting in the crew room and banter, and it was generally light-hearted, but it was persistent, and it was persistent too long. And the junior team didn't realise that they just carried it on far too long.
Obviously, I mean, the F-3 looked slick. It looked like a completely different generation to the Phantom. So I'm surprised the older guys wouldn't jump to the chance. I can't wait to get through this jet. But it sounds like not so much.
I think from the pilot's point of view, they did, because as the squadron stood up, they needed to draw people in, and they didn't want to have them all at one level of experience. And to begin with, as the squadrons formed, and I was part of 11 Squadron when it stood up at Leeming, you didn't want first tourists in at the start. We got about 6, 7, no, maybe about 9 months, I think, before we got our first tourists, brand new, to give us a chance to sort of sort ourselves out. But within the corps on the squadron itself, you had to have your experienced flight commanders, etc. But you needed to have some second tourists. Somebody like myself who'd only done half a tour on the first tour coming in at a junior level, so they've already built in that spread of experience.
Yeah.
And I think most of the front seaters were keen to go. What happened, and this is purely my opinion, but I think there's fact, is as the Phantom 4 shrunk towards the end, and in the end it was the Wattisham wing with the last.
Was that 74, wasn't it?
Yeah, 74 and 56. 56 went, it was July 92 that 65 Squadron changed to 56. But the guys left at Wattisham, I got the impression that they felt that they maybe missed the bus, and that they were now going to come to a well-established force and perhaps not have the status that they have at on the Phantom. You know, at Wattisham, and this is purely my opinion, so that I'll probably get arrows thrown at me for this.
But not me.
They were big fish in a small pool at Wattisham now, and then coming to the F3, where there were 7 squadrons now, even though they're experienced, they're going to learn a new trade, particularly the backseaters, with this extra display to use. They were going to be on a steep learning curve. And then the other problem we had, and again, it was because the backseaters had the biggest transition to make. Pilots, yes, you have to learn how to fly the F3, but you're flying a jet. It's not that much of a leap forward. But the backseaters had a big mind shift on the way they did their job. What you then had was guys, experienced navigators in the F4, going off to a ground tour, being promoted to squadron leader, and the system says, right, you're now going back to an air defence squadron as a squadron exec, a flight commander.
Yeah, right.
There's no Phantom squadrons left, so you're going to an F3. So they would go back, and they're now going in as a squadron leader on an F3 squadron, never having flown the jet before, and a lot of them found it difficult because they've got to do their exec job with all the responsibilities that come with that, as well as do the job in the air. And no names, doesn't matter, but I know several who struggled at that point. And they were put there because the system required them to be there. It's one of those things. But eventually, as the experience level grew, the squadrons got through it, and then everything was fine after that.
So the guys let's say the back seat is probably not so much the pilots. Did anyone fail the F3 course and get kicked out? Or was that not really?
No, that happened. And also, some were chopped off the squadron because of that. And I was thinking specifically, these squadron leaders coming in as execs that they couldn't hack it. They were quite advanced in their career, and they were asked to make quite a big jump in the professional techniques, shall we say. It was tricky, and it happened. With the training, you're always trying to weed out those that you believe aren't going to make it as early as possible, because of course saves money. So chopping at the OCU is, you do it if you have to do it, but it's obviously, that's money that has been spent that's not now going to produce what you thought it was, and the squadron even more. Generally speaking, the guys front and back who get that far are not going to fall out the flying system completely. They will be re-rolled, and so the Air Force would get something back from them, whether it's multis or whatever. So it's not a total loss, but it's always a big hit to the guys themselves.
Yeah, I was going to say, if that's all you dreamed of and you worked so hard, it must be awful.
It is, and I've had to do it. I can't remember how many times, but as an instructor in the OCU, and we've done it on the squadron with a young backseater who just wasn't getting there.
And how do you do that? Is it basically come to my office, or do you just say, I don't think, is it like more private thing?
No, it's not. I mean, he obviously, the individual knows if he's in trouble. It's more structured on the OCU because you have finite hours, and then if you have to repeat syllabus trips, you start to go on to review, and we you make a big thing that review is actually make sure that we are focusing on you to help you. Of course, the individual goes review, searchlight, and there's an axe above me. Now, there's truth on both sides. But on the OCU, there's only a finite amount of hours that an individual can get. And then it gets more and more critical, and unfortunately it puts the pressure on as you use more hours, and perhaps they're not performing as well, which means they're not going to. It gets worse and worse to a point where the two walls come together and you're in a corner and you can't go any further. So they generally know it's going to happen. If there's on the trip that it comes to an end, they will generally know in the debrief that you haven't passed that trip, and for the reasons. And they will know what's coming next, because they will then and it would be the boss. But before he does that, he would speak to group and let them know what's likely to happen, etc., etc. And latterly, we also had to prepare the paperwork so that there was actually a review board. So it wasn't just the opinion of a pilot flying with a navigator, and then the boss decides, yes, that's true. We'd also have to have all the sorted reports, and it would go to an independent board, so it would be like another squadron leader from another squadron on the base. So at Coningsby, say somebody from 29 gets involved, they get to read the reports, and they're just there to say, yes, that's a fair assessment, and you've come to a fair judgment. Particularly if the individual feels that he or she was hard done by, because you're always going to get personality clashes and stuff like that. And people quite naturally, when they go down fighting, or some of them do, and it can get quite nasty at times, when they say, oh, well, he was out to get me, that wasn't...
It was all that,
exactly. But it's never played. Others just know, they accept it and they go, no, you're right, and I can't crack this. And so what they're looking for is, what's the next thing I can do? Where can I go? And that's it. It didn't happen that often, but that was part and parcel. And it was probably easier, more straightforward if it happened on the squadron. Because they've got more experience, they've got more about it, and they've had more time, and they're seeing that, God, this isn't what, and I can see everybody else can do this, and I can't, whatever, whether it's front or back. And that was life.
So to move on, not move on too much, but I was looking at today, like swing wing aircraft, and did you ever get to fly with, or even formate with a MiG-23 or 27 on the Tornado? Because I've never seen any pictures of them together.
No, the only ones that and even then it was very briefly, was the MiG-29, and they were the ones that were inherited from East Germany. They were absorbed into the Luftwaffe. They were at Lager, I think it was. I've got there are a few stories from I have knowledge-wise, when I was on the OEU, and that was just after it happened. Suffice to say that there was great interest in those aircraft over there, and people, shall I say, from the Air Force or from the United Kingdom Defence Network were looking at them very closely. I'm sure the Americans were as well. They got to get a good look at them. And then, of course, it became more open when they were flying them, and they started to join these integrated exercises and stuff like that. They were very smoky. Even smokier than the J-79. Very smoky. And surprisingly short-legged in terms of fuel. Don't hang around much. I mean, they're better than Lightnings, but they didn't hang around much. And to be honest, you could argue they weren't designed to. You know, the Su-27 was your longer range air superiority fighter, whereas the MiG-29 was more close in and stuff. So they weren't asking it to stay around for a long time. It would be operating closer to its bases. But we were surprised how short their vulnerability periods were in exercises. You know, they're they're going home already. Exactly.
But one of the best, I think that video we did, of the F-3 versus the F-14, it's gone wild, and reading the comments is amazing. I don't know if you read any, but I just wish someone took a picture of you when I think you said fake off or something.
Yeah, that's right.
That would have been great to see them two together.
That's right. I can't remember which carrier it was, but yeah. But the problem was we had the big jugs on as well, the 2250s. So we had no. That's my excuse. We had no. But I mean, it was one of those things, and we did see it again. Again, I was on the OEU, and we were just introducing JTIDs, the data link system, to the F3, and we went out to Mountain Home.
Yeah, you mentioned this in that.
And the VF2 came up from Miramar, and a Hawkeye came up because it was using JTID and all on Link 16, which is basically the network. It's like Windows or Apple Mac type stuff. So we were using Link 16, and we wanted to make sure we could talk to each other because we had our E3 with us. There was us, the Mountain Home F15s. Were using data link, and the F14s and the E2, so it was all literally interoperability. I remember taxiing out behind the some VF2 F14s.
Oh wow!
Massive.
Oh, that would have been exciting to see.
My boss at the time on the OEU had done an exchange tour on the Tomcat.
Oh wow!
And he wangled a backseat trip.
Oh, of course.
We kind of thought, hang on, boss, you've had some.
I know, give it some.
Yeah, somebody else. No, he got in. So he went up in one of the F14s on one of the trips there. I did get up in an F15, so 2-seat F15, so that was fine.
Pretty cool, but so I want to talk. We've discussed it before. The wing sweep, like how often were you actually in 67 wing? Because it just looks so good in that.
It depends what you're doing, really. It's just, as I keep saying, it's like driving a car. When are you in fifth? Well, when I'm on the motorway or tootling along. It happened quite often. It was not the most. I suppose if you looked at over the week and the sorties we flew, and you examined the wing sweeps, it wasn't the most popular or the most frequent.
Looks the best.
Yeah, it would be 25 or 45 were more used because they were more useful in terms of the stuff we were doing. I mean, much as it's great fun to hot rod around in straight lines at Mach whatever, you're in 67 wing. We don't do that all the time. So your wings are generally further forward. But no, it's exactly just like a gearbox in the car. You just be in the right gear for the speed you're going, be in the right wing sweep for the speed you're going, and that was it.
Yeah, and also just talking about 43 Squadron, I'm sure you mentioned it in one of their interviews, and you basically said that's where I want to be on 43. Did it matter about the aircraft? Or did you just want to be on 43, that was it? Yeah,
well, when that happened, I was about 10.
Oh, okay.
Right? So I was at school, and I knew I was wanted to be an RAF pilot, and 43 were formed in Stirling. I came from Stirling, so home squadron, it's simple. And I'd been coming to the Lookers Air Show by that stage. 43 had just reformed in 69, so when I say I was 10, I was probably a little bit older. I would have to be 11, 12. And there they are with their black and white checkered scarves, and I'm going, that's it, that's where I want to be. Oh, that's the Phantom behind it, so that's obviously what I'm going to fly. So it came that way, but very quickly I fell in love with the Phantom, because I learned all about it as an aircraft enthusiast. And because 43 if 43 had still been on Hunters, and I'd been focusing on Hunters, if they'd been Lightnings or something like that, if they'd been Buccaneers, for instance, I would have been focusing on Buccaneers, falling in love with the Buccaneer, and that's what I would wanted to fly, I'm sure. Yeah. So 43 led me to the Phantom, but very quickly, that was it.
And how often, did new air crew pick the aircraft before they picked the squadron? So that they said, I just want F3, I don't care what squadron, where I'm based. How often was that?
Yeah, I would say that was the majority.
Right, okay.
The majority. I think there's very few people were driven from an early stage for a squadron. Mostly it would be aircraft type or location. Okay. So they wouldn't care. Of course, once you get to your squadron, it becomes tribal. Absolutely tribal. Over at Lookers, Treble 143, Rangers Celtic. I remember over at Wildenrath as well, and I was never based there, but I saw how the boys were. 1992. I mean, before you got there, I'm sure the guys didn't really care. They're going to Germany, brilliant. And then you arrived and you're blue and white. Right, that's it. 19. Ooh, that lot over there. You could easily have gone red and yellow and be gone 92 and the other lot. And same at Wattisham, I'm guessing, and Coningsby. Oh, bollocks! Bollocks!
So I want to kind of like change subjects a bit here, Roy, but what are your thoughts on social media? Because you're quite active on it, a few groups, but what are your thoughts on it in terms of aviation?
Well, I like social media. I have to admit, I use it a lot to advertise or show off my photography, which is the other thing I'm doing now, you know, my main hobby. So that is useful from that point of view. From an aviation point of view, I'm not an aviation photographer. There's plenty of people around here who are really good.
Oh yeah.
You know, Jeff Lee and on. I've known Jeff for many, many years.
Yeah.
So I find that I don't try and do aviation photography because you might think it's a bit defeatist, but my interests are elsewhere. So that's primarily for social media. So aviation-wise, I have to admit I have a short patience level with it. There's a certain sight that I can only last about 5 seconds on.
I think I know which one you mean.
Before I absolutely blow my top. Pea prune.
There you go, folks.
Pea prune. There are so many experts on there that know it all and just spout rubbish, authoritatively rubbish. And I just can't even be bothered arguing with them. I just stay away from it. There was only one time, and there's actually a bit of a story to it. It actually leads into a flying story I could tell you.
Go on then.
But there was the 2000 and let's call it 2008 Calcutta Cup. It might have been the 2007. I can't know. It must be 2008 Calcutta Cup. So Scotland playing England at Murrayfield. Fly past. I'm leading it.
Nice.
What actually happened in the stadium was there was an almighty downpour just before kick-off. Now the ref, Jonathan Kaplan from South Africa, was told, do not kick off, don't blow the whistle until the jets have gone over. Okay? Right. So there's this almighty downpour over Murrayfield, and as far as the crowd are concerned, the royal presentations happened, Princess Royal and all that sort of stuff, and the team's ready. And with Johnny Wilkinson standing there with the ball, bouncing in the pouring rain, looking at the ref, and the ref's going, no, the jets haven't come over yet. So they waited and waited and waited, and they waited about 30 seconds in the pouring rain. And on the television, Brian Moore, apparently on the commentary, said, we shouldn't be waiting for this silly sideshow, we need to be getting on with the game. Jets go over, Kaplan blows the whistle, and the game goes on. But to everybody in the stadium, the Air Force are late. The Air Force are late, can't get there on time, bloody hell. Then those that knew it was, we're actually on, we're 43, we'll be on 56 then, we're on 56. It was the F3s, we're late. And there was all sorts of diatribe going on, pea prune, and that's when I went, right, okay, I'm going to have to go on and sort this, because there's just crap. And I said, there are a lot of people posting on here from a position of ignorance. This is what happened. The SRU wanted the jets to be overhead at 19 minutes past and 30 seconds. The Princess Royal was taking a bit longer to do her walk round and meet the teams, and communications were fraught difficult because what you had was somebody on the ground at Murrayfield phoning air traffic at Edinburgh who were in contact with us. And they made the decision, we need a minute delay because the Princess Royal's not in position. Okay, so to Edinburgh Airport tells me, can you just lose a minute? Okay, well, we can't just pull over. We then developed a loop.
Yeah.
We gave them a minute's delay. We came over exactly 1 minute later, to the second. In fact, what they needed was about 30 seconds delay.
Right.
They asked for a minute, they got a minute. But on the ground,
yeah,
particularly since it was pouring with rain, and everybody thought it was the Air Force was late. So I had to go on to P-Prune and tell them, and they said, that's exactly what happened. I know because I led the formation. I hope this brings this thread to a close. Bang.
Absolutely not.
And it did. Well, it did actually. Nobody said anything after that.
Oh, wow, I thought someone had said
But that's P-Prune. So if we go back to social media, and across, whether it's Facebook or stuff like that, it's when you get people who claim to be experts who obviously aren't. And I don't argue anymore. I find it. I can't be bothered going in to correct them because it happens so often.
Yeah, it happens. Like obviously, because I'm on YouTube, that's where these videos go, and there'll be comment after comment, and they're all like contradicting each other, and they all think they're right. So I don't get involved anymore because you can never win.
No.
Win.
What I can tell you now is what was happening in this formation, because formations, you think fly pasts are dead easy. They're dead easy. I mean, you just stand again over the top, they go and what have you. I might have told some fly past stories before, I'm not sure if I've ever. Anyway, what it actually is like a swan going down the river. On the surface it's all nice and calm, but underneath it's, and this was no exception.
Yeah.
We got out there in good order, and we actually were holding out near the Bass Rock, North Berwick, not far from East Fortune. So it's about a minute and a half run in, and when we got there, in plenty of time, it was lovely weather. So we're just in the hold. That's it. And Phil Manav was giving me the countdown. He says, right, I'll probably two more laps and then we'll be in. That's it. And we were just about to set off when we got this message from air traffic. Can you Rolex, that's the code word to put time back, Rolex 1 minute. Okay, so luckily there's only two of us, and Sam, the other pilot, is tucked in behind me, line of stern, and he just follows me. We basically just do a 90 right and point towards Fife for about 25 seconds, 5 seconds to turn around, another 25 seconds back, 5 seconds to turn in, there's your minute gone, we're back to where we were. Yeah. That's how you do it. And that worked. And we came round and Phil said, yep, we're now 1 minute behind where we should be. We're exactly on track, on time. Just keep it nice and steady. And then I look up ahead, expecting to see Portobello and the city, and I can see a black wall. And I went, oh, I don't believe it. Oh, come on, referee. There's this shower cloud right in the way. I went, oh, and he says, do you think you can make it? And I said, well, we'll do it. And we run in, we go over Portobello Beach, and I can see Arthur's Seat to my left disappearing. But it's nothing, and all I'm really praying for is to see the three spires of St Mary's Church, the west end of Edinburgh. Because if I've got that, then it's only about a mile beyond where Murrayfield is, and I'll be able to find it. I can almost read the streets. So we're going to see Princess Street disappearing, the castle in a smear to the left, and I'm oh, come on. And Phil's saying, we're on time, we're on track, we're on time, we're on track, we're at 1,000 feet. Here we go. And then St Mary's came out and I saw the three spires. I thought, great, I've got St Mary's. And then I could see two horizontal white lines ahead. And I realised that was the floodlights of the stadium. Oh. And I went, we've got it. I went over the top. And then, of course, as we go over the top, plug the burners in for a bit of noise. Yeah. But Sam needs to hang on to me, so it couldn't be for too long because we get separated in the bad weather. Yeah. So we then said, cut. So come back to dry power. Sam's still there. And then we're now basically in cloud this way. I can see the ground, but I can't see around. And I know that we can't turn because Castorphin Hill is now to my right where the zoo is, but I can see houses. And I thought, well, we'll just keep going straight. We're talking to Edinburgh traffic anyway. And then I saw the bypass disappear underneath me, and I thought, right, we're now past all the high ground, I can now ease it right. And the moment we eased right, bing, out of cloud, blue skies, Edinburgh Airport, over the top, there's the bridges, everything's fine. And air traffic were clearing us back to Lookers, and I looked back and it was just a mother of dark storm right over west. Oh yeah. We were invited back to the game, but of course, the game's just kicked off.
So getting
there, and the MT was waiting for us. To cut long story short, we arrived at the stadium just about the final whistle. That's timing.
Right.
Now Scotland did win the Calcutta Cup, but we're trooping across this muddy car park, and jacket and tie and all the rest of it. And the boy that was hosting us met us at the stadium door, and he said, "Oh, you're just in time. Come this way, lads. That's fine." And we go through this corridor, through a double door. Oh, we're in the stadium. Oh, and that's the Royal Box in front of us. Wow. And the protection police are sort of going, "Who's this?" And it's the Tornado Cruise. Don't worry, it's the Tornado. Right, okay. So we're standing, and there's a fur hat there, just right there, and that's the Princess Royal. And Mike Blair comes up and gets the Calcutta Cup and all this shit. And we're chatting away to people, and there's obviously very important people around us. And then I was aware that Phil, my nav, was now talking to somebody in the room, and it was Des Brown, who at the time was Secretary of State for Scotland, but also Secretary of State for Defence. And he's having a good chat. He says, "Oh, it seemed a bit difficult, boys." Yeah, and how did you? Well, I thought you did really well. And he said, "But do you know the best thing about that fly past? Everybody in the stadium thinks I organised it." And I thought, yeah, there's a politician for you. Right? Brilliant. Anyway, we had a bit of chat, and then they started to move off inside. And we obviously had to hang back while the Royal Box cleared. But I remember the Secretary of State turning round to us and saying, "I'll see you inside for a drink, boys." I thought, no, Secretary of State for Defence does not say to a couple of flight attendants, "I'll see you inside for a drink." But he did. Anyway, off he went. And we eventually come in at the back and all this. And there was a natural sort of hold up where they were hanging coats up. And there's Des Brown again. So he said, "Oh, come over here." He introduces us to this rather tall gentleman who turns out to be Tim Lawrence. Can't remember his rank, but enough to know he was called Sir. I know. Yeah. And shall I say it? I'll probably go to the Tower for this, but he is the cardboard cutout that he looks like. Not much of a personality, I'm afraid. But anyway, chatting away, trying to get conversation with him, and yes, well, very good. And then I'm aware of somebody standing just off my right shoulder, and I turn, and it's the Princess Royal. Oh. And I went, "I've just crossed some muddy, I hope there's no mud in my shoes and all the rest of it." No, this was jacket and tie now. Okay. Yeah, squadron tie, what have you. So the Princess Royal's there. I forget royal protocol completely and immediately stick my hand out. You're apparently supposed to wait for royals to present there. No. So she kind of looked at me and we shook hands and she said, "Oh yes." So you were flying the Tornadoes. Yeah. She said, "What height were you when you went over the stadium?" And I took a quick swallow and said, "Well, ma'am, my minimum authorised height was 1,000 feet. Mm-hmm. And she looked at me and she said, "Yes, those Tornado aircraft are quite large, aren't they?" And I went, "I can't argue with that, ma'am. Can't argue with that." That is the closest to a royal bollocking that I ever wanted to get. But it was the most surreal 10 minutes of my life. You start going across a muddy car park, listening to the crowd at the end of the match, and finishes with me having a conversation with the Princess Royal.
Yeah. That is incredible. Yeah. So did you just have the burners on just over there? Just for noise, that's all. Just for noise.
And actually, we weren't. You don't go that low, because the lower you go, the less time people have to see you. Mm-hmm. If you can imagine, you're right up at height, the effects lost, but you can see for longer. And given the fact that a lot of the stadium is covered, people are going, "Oh." Yeah. So if you come over at 0.6, what was that? Yeah. It's a waste. So actually coming in low over the stadium doesn't actually help.
Because I didn't think you were allowed to put burners on over like cities or anything like that. I don't know.
For flight safety reasons, to preserve, to get your speed back if you need it, right. Officer. Really, that's when you would be allowed to use burner. Otherwise, you're not supposed to. So I needed to put the burner in to get speed.
Of course, yeah. But yeah, because obviously, did you mainly do your flying around Scotland, or did you get all over the country and like a kind of normal routine?
Normal routine, mostly Scotland, right. Or the North Sea.
Yeah.
Occasionally we'd get down to your neck of the woods, the danger areas off northeast England if we're working with Leeming, something like that. But generally speaking, it would be the vast bulk was over the water, east of Leuchars, maybe going up towards Aberdeen. Yeah. Stuff over land in the Highlands. Berwick down towards Newcastle, that sort of area. Yeah. The southwest became more difficult, more congested. By that I mean Galloway Peninsula. Yeah. Western Isles good, like that. The only problem with that was it was poorer radar coverage. And so while it was good on a nice day to be batting around the islands, the UCAJ couldn't actually see you as well, so we had to really go with where they could see us if we were going to get the training value.
And did you you say you were out in the North Sea and stuff like that, and there was F-15s out there, we were like, oh, let's have a pop at them, or was it, or did you have to arrange it?
No, there was something called target of opportunity, and it was an agreed set of fairly loose rules that you could tap in on somebody. It wasn't air combat because it was very defined manoeuvring, and it was supposed to finish with a wing rock and say that was it. Equally, if you start to dive in against somebody and they're wing rocking immediately, it means, no, we're not interested, go away, we're probably got an exercise and you're about to muck up our training. So that was the sign to say, look, go away, we're not interested. But we used to do it all the time. There were other times when people would come in, they wouldn't even know you were there. You know,
really?
They're not even looking out, you know, you go, who was that, you know? So that was target of opportunity. And there wasn't so much up here, but down south there was a famous geographical point where Watersham, Coningsby, Binbrook, all that sort of area, you know, you could go if you were looking for a fight, you know. Blakeney Point is the name of it in Norfolk. Hang around Blakeney and, you know, generally, in the good old days when there was plenty of aircraft, you would get a fight. Yeah, if somebody would come along and have a wee bit of a...
Oh, that sounds brilliant, yeah.
The problem was, quite often you didn't know who it was, and so you couldn't get a full debrief. The big thing that changed that, and it came very late in my, not very late, but in the last part of my F3 days, is something called raids, which is basically an ACMI pod, but it doesn't rely on ground masts like... You know, the ACMI range in the North Sea. These are rangeless pods, and they talk to each other.
Right.
So you have a PCI-MICA card, whatever it's called. That format of card goes in with your mission details, and it's also recording the aircraft's position and its manoeuvring. It could do weapon events, but for security, we inhibited it because we didn't want weapon parameters going out in the open air unsecured. So we didn't generally, and neither did the Americans, allow it to record weapon events. But you could see manoeuvring and all that sort of stuff, plus identification of other pods. So you didn't even have to know who these people were. You're just flying around, and we'd put in, and it would play back on a PC, big screen, superimposed part of the UK, so you could see where you were, maybe a low flying chart if you're over land, and you could see these other pods coming in. You could interrogate it and get the call sign, and it would be like, you know, that's Scorpion 3, and you can get on, oh, it's who's Scorpion 3 again? Oh, that was a Harrier out of Wittering or something, and you could actually see how you went on. So you got much more training out of it from that point of view. Of course, it worked if it was all scripted anyway, and you could see them. But that target of opportunity type thing was good. That became a lot better. And I guess again, I'm out of touch now, but I would guess that the Typhoons are using raids or something better, you know, in the same form. Yeah. And it's just pods talking to each other. Yeah. So you can see it happen.
And obviously we're here for a happy hour episode. So have you got any good happy hour stories from your time, you know, Friday night in the bar?
Yeah, right. Well, it was tribal. I've used the word already, but if you go back to Luchers in the late 80s, it really was tribal. And I'm guessing that Coningsby, Watersham, Wildenrath, no different. Yeah. But there was a 43 Squadron End, there was a Treble 1 Squadron End, and I remember the University Air Squadron were kind of stuck in the middle. It was before 228 came in. And yeah, there'd be songs and all the rest of it. But there were times when it did get a bit nasty. Oh, really? It did get a bit nasty. Somebody got whacked over the head with a snooker cue once. What? You know, it just got too carried away.
Too much of that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
But I mean, things like getting thrown out the window, that was standard. Yeah, absolutely. But it was good. It was good. And in those days, there was less crossover between the two squadrons in terms of postings. Yeah. We tended not to operate as a wing, which is a completely different concept now. So there were people there that I knew were on Treble 1, but I didn't really know them at that time.
Yeah.
And so that kind of heightened this them and us attitude. It was quite a rarity to get posted across the runway. You tended to go to another station, just the way the system worked. Now that was completely different in the F3, for many reasons, and I'm sure the Typhoon's the same. There's much more of a mixture, and it's one force, as the Americans like to call it, one team, one fight. But in those days, it was good when it got boisterous with the songs, you know. Treble One had a reputation for always taking the cable. And we had in the cable, that's where you'll find Treble One, in the cable, and they had stuff for us, etc., etc.
Was it any actual, you were saying, sometimes you got nasty in the bar? Was there any nasty rivalries between people from different squadrons where they just was going to kick off, or?
It was usually down to an individual who just had, either had a mean streak or couldn't handle his drink or something like that.
Yeah.
That's generally how it went. It didn't happen too often.
So it was mainly friendly banter.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, because and also the happy hour thing. I think it's I saw a video. I can't remember where it was, Roy, but it's basically where you get your wings and then you pick your aircraft you want to go onto, and they do the spin board.
Yeah. they have all sorts of ways of doing it. And the first time I came across it, and there's all sorts of combinations. Yeah. It was at end attack weapons, which doesn't exist anymore. But basically, I went from Valley in the Hawk, where they teach you to fly a fast jet. You get your wings. I then I went to Brodie to one tack weapons unit, where I'm still flying a Hawk, but now they're teaching you how to fight it. Use it as a weapons platform. So dropping bombs, firing the rockets, firing the gun, that sort of stuff. At the end of that, you're going to go to an OCU. Now in my day, so that'd be 86, coming out of tack weapons, there were a lot of aircraft types. And what they had was a table with names across the top, an aircraft type down the side, and various combinations of what you could go to, etc., crosses or not. And they did it like a slow reveal, because they started off by saying, well, the first thing I can tell you is that Archie is not going to the Buccaneer. Right, where's Archie? And Buccaneer, so you're looking for every row that doesn't, and then you say, well, what does that leave for me? And it was, of course, you've all had something to drink, so it was really difficult. So I ended up going to the Phantom, which is where I wanted to go. Yeah. Phantom, that's where it came back to squadron. I was the only one who was after a squadron. Everyone else was saying, I'd like to go to Wilderness, I'd like to go to Lookers, I'd like to go to Wattisham, whatever. I'm the only one that's running a presidential campaign, get Roy Mac to 43. I had little black and white checkers signs everywhere. And what happened, we were down in, I think it's the Abbey, on the way to Woodhall Spa, and we had the room there. And the way they did it was spinning wheel, but it was really, really cruel, because you had a helmet bag on, right? So you spun the wheel, and wherever it stopped, that was your squadron. But you were the last to know, because you had a helmet bag on.
Right.
And of course, what's happening is one of the staff who's got the list would stop the wheel at the right point. So when I spun the wheel, and I'm going, come on, 43, 43, when it stopped, I could hear everybody behind me go, oh no. And I thought, oh, jinx. Ah. So I took my helmet bag off, and it's 56 at Wattisham. And I remember Dave Shaw looking at me going, sorry, Roy, there wasn't a slot on 43. Okay, right, so I made the best of a bad job. It was more the fault. I'd built myself up.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, Suffolk, here I come. I was just finishing the course when a mate of mine who had been on the course ahead of me, and we'd gone through Valley together, he'd been posted to 43 off the course ahead. But 43 were out in Cyprus, and he hadn't turned up on the squadron yet. He'd been given 3 weeks leave.
Right.
So he said, do you want to swap? I went, careful, Dave, because I'm not going to stop this. I will push this. He says, I'm serious. I haven't pitched up the squadron. He wanted to go to Wattisham, but for his course, there were no slots at Wattisham. So I spoke to my flight commander, and he said, well, okay, I'll have a word with it. And eventually, words were spoken. I said, I'll take no leave. I'll go straight to 43. That's it. So they had a look at the 5,000s, or flying reports, and they said, yeah, we'll swap.
Brilliant.
So that's how I got there finally to 43.
Yeah.
And my mate Dave went to 56. And his life was defined by that, because he was flying the Phantom that lost control when he was fighting against a Mirage in northern France.
Oh, I've not heard that.
Yeah, basically it went into a spin, and they couldn't get it out. And they both ejected. They were fine. Both ejected, were fine. but, you know, that was one of those life moments where he's suddenly on that squadron and that happened to him. And I may have been flying that sortie, I don't know.
Yeah,
you know? But yeah, exactly. So yeah, he didn't stay in the Air Force long after that. He became an airline pilot and what have you.
Yeah, because like, why do like I always thought, you know, Air Force guys after they finish their career just automatically go to their airlines, but a lot of them actually don't. I've found out they just not really for them.
That's true. That's true. And of course, the market forces, as we see now, there's a lot. You know, the airlines are. But if we forget all that and just go normal operations for airlines, it's a healthy intake. But I never considered it. I don't want to drive a bus. You know, that's what it is, a long distance bus driver.
Yeah.
No, never appealed to me, never attempted to do ATPL or anything like that. Some guys went early because they were just looking for either the money or the lifestyle, stability in terms of knowing what they're going to do month after month, etc. Plan their lives out, get holidays. That's great. And I would never decry anybody for doing that. It just wasn't me. Some people were happy to get out of the Air Force and go and do something else completely. And me, I was in the, I would say, a minority where I said, well, I joined the Air Force to fly jets. I'm lucky I'm doing that. I want to stay in a cockpit as long as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, that's why I did. February 2009 was when I eventually, you know, after my 50th birthday came out.
Yeah.
There's another quick story. We're up at, for my 50th, which was the previous November, we were up doing, I was on Stanival at the time, so we were tactically evaluating Treble 1 Squadron, who were up on, not CQY, what's the other one? One of the big exercises.
I'm not sure.
Altogether, doesn't matter, all based at Lossiemouth, and I was flying with one of the junior navs, and we're on this mission. We were number 4 down the back, and the wing commander who was in charge of the debriefs would summarised it all up and said, yeah, so overall I thought it was quite good. But he said there was one thing that I didn't like, and he said, Scampi 5-4, where are you? And that's my call sign. So myself and
what a call sign.
Tim, the nav I was flying with, stood up, and Tim's going a bit away. He's going, bloody hell, what have we done? And the wing commander looked at me, he says, I tell you what, I think I'll just leave your squadron boss to deal with this. And I thought, I know what this is. It's all right, Tim, you can sit down. It's all right. And he came in and he said, yeah, there's not many pilots are still flying fast jets when they're 50. Not many are flying on the front line, a big exercise, however, and they brought in a cake and all that type of stuff. And Tim was going, because he thought he was in trouble.
So just going on to another subject here, Roy. Have you seen the video where Gordon Ramsay goes flying? Is that with 43 Squadron?
That was with 43.
Yeah.
Where was I? I wasn't on 43 at the time. I'm not even sure I was on. Maybe I was on Treble 1. The short answer is no. I didn't see it. I've heard a few stories, etc., etc. And overall, it was a positive thing because these things are good for the Air Force.
Yeah. But I was thinking, like, what do you aircrew guys think when these celebrities come in? Are they normally nice? Or, like, you don't have to name names, but...
Well, I don't think we've ever broached the subject, but if you look back at the interviews I've done for you when I'm upstairs in the study, on the wall behind me is a rather large frame.
Is that with the Scotland?
Yeah. I've also, at the bottom, just framed within it is a newspaper clip. That's merely there just to add credence to what it actually is. That is Chris Hoy's racing suit from the Manchester Commonwealth Games 2002. How did I get it? I took Chris Hoy flying.
Yeah.
Again, it was a PR thing for the Air Force. It was just before the air show of 2002. Or was it 2003? Doesn't matter. And they got him in, and of course they were going to take a photographer and it was press release, and it was in the papers, etc., etc. Did the usual thing. You take him flying round the Highlands and then over the water, supersonic, and he thought that was absolutely brilliant. And then there's a few shots of us standing there. He's got his racing bike and all the rest of it. And he had his gold medal. He had 3 gold medals from Manchester. And he had them there showing them, and that was great. And then just as he was leaving, we just got changed. I was in the locker room. He came in and he says, Roy, here you are. and he handed me his racing suit. And I thought, oh, brilliant. You know, I thought that's really good. And then for about 17 years or so, it sat in the wardrobe. No, I never put it on. No. How do you know it's his? Well, it's obviously the Scotland team racing, because it's all there. But the only reason you knew it was his, because on the ballpoint pen on the label, it got Hoy written on it. You know,
like
so that was
school or something.
That's school. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And eventually, I thought, no, I really do need to get this framed. So that's it on the wall.
Yeah.
Massive one. There's an ex-Air Force engineer who's now got a framing service in Cooper. And it was a hard job for him, but he got it done, and he incorporated in one of the newspaper clippings of a photograph of us together and the story of it, you know, just to give it some, not credence, what's the thing they talk about? Provenance.
Oh, right.
Provenance, if it was ever, you know, beyond me.
Right, yeah.
But no, he was good. And the funny thing there was, 2008. Yes, back to fly pass at Murrayfield. The chief executive of the SRU commented to me after I'd met the Princess Royal. He said, "Oh, Roy, did you enjoy the game?" I said, "No, we don't get to see the game." He said, "We don't get there." He says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, by the time we landed, I've just arrived to the final." "Oh, no, we'll have to sort that." He said, "I'll get somebody to be in touch with you for the autumn internationals." And sure enough, they invited the fly past crews of the four of us and our wives to one of the autumn internationals. Which one? We'll take the All Blacks, please.
Yeah.
So that was it. So we're there for the day, right? So when we arrive at Murrayfield into the President's Suite or whatever, about an hour before kick-off or whatever, and the free bar, of course, so the air crew are going to be there early. There's Chris Hoy, because he's going to put the match ball out. He's going to bring the match ball out, you see. So I said to my wife, "Come on, there's Chris. We'll go over and meet." "Oh, no, I don't want to go." "Come on," he's... No. I said, "Well, I'm going to go over." So I went over and I said, "Chris, you might not remember me, but we flew in a Tornado about 6 years ago." And he went, Mum, come over here. Here's the Tornado pilot. Come over here." And it all turned.
Like a reverse, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, no, you're the star, not me, you know. But he is as nice as he comes across on the television. He's an exceptionally nice bloke. His wife, it wasn't his wife then, but his fiancée was there. His mum and dad were there. Exceptionally nice people. And eventually, Philippa came across, and she was introduced. And after that, there was only one person in the room, and it wasn't me. She would have, brilliant. So that was us coming back together.
That's brilliant. And so back in the day, was it easier for something like me or Joe Bloggs or whatever to get a backseat trip in an F3?
No.
Or was it still quite difficult?
Always difficult. You had what's in it for the Air Force.
So you had to give.
You had to have a PR profile. Not necessarily a PR profile. There had to be some payback for the Air Force. If it was, the hard luck story, the somebody, the charity sort of thing, etc., something that would give the Air Force a story to go to the press with, that could work.
Benefit them in a positive light.
The people that actually had the easiest, relatively speaking, with minimum fuss, were of course the ground crew. So we used to fly the ground crew a lot as payback, particularly out in Cyprus. That was within the gift of the boss. So he could do that with minimum fuss. And so we would do that.
That's great.
And particularly if there was guys who were leaving. And some of the guys didn't want a trip. Some of the guys got 3 or 4 trips. No, maybe not 3 or 4. Generally speaking, they would get a trip before they go. And that was always good. Probably
more difficult now, especially with this day and age.
Well, there's a lot more rigmarole in terms of prep for a Typhoon trip, particularly if it's a one-off.
Yeah.
Getting kitted out. It's great if you're a Typhoon pilot. You get kitted out once. There's your kit. You put it on and off. No bother. If you're starting from scratch, the safety equippers have got a heck of a job. I mean, it's like half a morning.
So it's not just like small, medium, large for your helmets?
No. All the kit, it takes a long time to get it sorted.
Oh, you don't think
so
that,
it's
really?
actually a lot more, and I don't know about an F-35. You can't do it. So forget that. But Typhoon trips are more difficult. So people that get Typhoon trips, there has to be probably an increased payback to the Air Force. If it isn't ground crew, and I'm guessing ground crew get to fly.
Yeah.
So
when you were going through and stuff like that, so you got your flight clubber, and that was it, or did you have a shelf, or did you take it home? Like what did you do with it?
No, the flying clothing in the when we're in the hardened accommodation, there was what we call the pedestal area, So it was like a sports locker room, really, with things to hang up. And you would leave helmets, jackets, immersion suits, G trousers, all that sort of thing in there.
Right.
And the equippers would look after it, safety equippers would look after it. Stuff I'd bring home, we had flying suit, flying jacket, the roll neck shirt, and of course long john socks and flying boots, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Gone were the days when, and it existed, where a certain squadron commander would insist on his aircrew changing into blues uniform if you had more than 2 hours between debrief and the rebrief for your next flight.
Why?
Because that's the way he operated.
That makes no practical sense.
And
you had to, oh God, yeah.
Now, I was a holding officer at the time. I'm not going to say his name because traditionally, if you say his name, and there'll be people watching this who know who I'm talking about, if you say his name, it's a round of drinks, straight away.
So you can't comment there. So
correct. But he then became a station commander, he then became very senior and retired, and he's still around. I meet him occasionally. He is a knight of the realm, but yes, he had a way of operating that was a bit strange.
Yeah, like obviously I've done this quite a while now, and you hear stories of some. I just thought, I know this is probably just tarnishing you with all the same brush, all the same blokes and gals, but there's the odd one here and there that are a bit, Oh God.
I mean, you see it all the time. The same with squadron bosses. There were some brilliant squadron bosses, and I had a couple that would go, no, you want to reach behind you, grab the bottle in your bottle opener.
Do I drink this out the bottle or pour it in, or is it how is it best to drink it?
Probably pour it in. Yeah. There was a couple of ones that I wouldn't rate much at all. There was one, again, no names, but we nicknamed him the Seagull because you had to throw stones at him to make him fly. He would rather stay off the programme and worry about trivia.
Yeah, because I was in, it hasn't been released yet, or maybe it's by the time this comes out, but I was in a Happy Hour episode with Kit Morton, Jag pilot, and I was asking him the same question. I was like, was the guys wanted to fly all the time, or was the guys or girls who said, nah, I don't want to fly? And he said, yeah, there was a fair few of them, and I was quite surprised at that. I thought you'd want to get as many hours in as possible.
Yeah, I think it was down to individuals. Really down to individuals, but this particular squadron boss just was wrapped up in trivia, really was, and he just would not want to be on the flying programme or on prominent sorties, shall we say. Yeah, I only know this other boss simply because I saw him through when I was an instructor in the OCU, but he had the exact opposite. He didn't care about the paperwork. His attitude was, let's kick the tyres, light the fires, and go flying. And be damned with the rest of it. I won't say too much because then people will start to work out exactly who it was. But let me say his term of command or period of command of the squadron didn't go well, and it finished early because of some tragic events, but some of which can be directly attributed to the way he managed the squadron, which was basically, let's go, follow me, boys. Let's go and do it.
Yeah, and there's probably squadron bosses like you probably still mates with to this day and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So how, I always I'm gonna ask Kit this, but he said there's always the odd one that gets through. It's like, how do these people get to high positions if they're a bit of a, I don't like this bloke. How do they get there? I can say this now because I'm not in the Air Force anymore. I'm hoping that it's got better, but certainly in the 80s and 90s, it was self-preservation. Right.
The higher echelons promoted like people.
Yeah.
If the higher you got, the easier it was to progress because the system.
It's like, you're like me.
I'm not saying it was not Masonic or anything like that, but if you knew how to play the system got you higher, and it was not down to personal ability and leadership. That's why there was this Legion. So, through the 80s, and I'm sure earlier than that, there'll be people who go, I could name, shouldn't have been there. But they got there through the system.
So back in the earlier days, was it about more like who you knew kind of thing, in a way?
Yeah, who you knew who was already there.
Yeah.
You know, and you then played the system. You did the right courses, and all that sort of stuff.
But I mean, like, just for me, obviously, if I would join the Air Force now as flying, that's all I would want to do. I wouldn't want to progress. I wouldn't want just to have a title or make more money. I'd want to fly.
That's exactly what my attitude was.
Did, yeah.
I knew that if I got promoted, the chances of being removed from the cockpit increased, and the higher you go up in rank, the further away from the cockpit you go.
Yeah.
So the squadron commander, through the workload that he has, can't fly. It doesn't matter how much he wants to fly, he can't fly as much as these flight lieutenant junior pilots because he's got so much extra work to do. You then take that to station commander level and it's even worse. You know, the station commanders at Lookers were maybe flying, well, if you flew once a week you'd be lucky.
Right.
And that was it. And that was, you know, that's not what I wanted.
And do you have a choice in that, or do you, like, if they say, right, you're going to move up, you're going to have to do it? Or?
Well, if you do everything that the system wants from you, you will end up getting promoted unless you're a complete idiot.
Right.
How you can avoid it is by saying you don't want promoted, and also not doing all the courses that you're supposed to do. And therefore, you then stay as a flight lieutenant. The danger is that you then get shipped off to something else, you know, that's not flying. Yeah. So what I did was I made myself as valuable to the Air Force in a cockpit as I possibly could. What did that mean? Getting myself qualified on all the things you could do: rear seat pilot instructor, air combat instructor, instrument rating examiner, ultimately qualified weapons instructor. I then got on. I then became the Stanival QFI. I became the Command IRE. All that sort of stuff to make myself invaluable to them, to keep me in the cockpit.
Yeah, right.
What does that mean? It means you're not going to be a wing commander. And I kind of made up my mind quite quickly. I didn't want to be a wing commander when I saw the boss had to deal with. I thought, squadron boss, that's the ultimate.
Yeah.
Well, it is for some people, particularly if they want to go higher, but it's not the ultimate flying post. The ultimate flying post on a squadron, a fast jet squadron, is the lead QY, the OC weapons, guns he's called, OC guns. And that's a regret on my part that I didn't make squadron leader and become OC weapons. Because to me, OC weapons, front or back seat, was the man or woman that the squadron commander turned to and said, guns, we're going on deployment in 3 months' time, get my squadron ready.
Right.
He would then lead the training package to get them operational. Or the very high profile sortie on a Friday, we've got an 8V8 against the Leeming wing. Guns, you're going to lead it. With maybe a junior oppo, if it's front or back seat. Guns would be the OC weapons, you know, QY leader, would be the person who should be able to do any mission that the squadron could be tasked for. The ultimate military aviator, and that's, to me, was the pinnacle. And the fact I didn't get there is a bit of a regret. I spent a long time in the weapons shop as a qualified weapons pilot, the QIP. So, I mean, the only trip I couldn't do on the squadron was assess a pilot doing a night visual ident procedure.
Right.
You know, when we use the radar to close up, it's called the phase 3, which is against an unlit target. So a phase 3 VID is probably the most tricky. Well, if you discount the phase 6, it's when you do it on the goggles.
Oh yeah.
But phase 3, you're going up against a black hole, and you're relying on the navigator to position you to the minimum, about 200 yards and position off. And then hopefully in the murk you might see something, because the target's got its lights out. That is probably the most difficult trip for a young navigator on the squadron to do. The phase 3 check, to get through that is trumph, because you've really got to be on the ball with the radar work. And it's always a senior navigator that does the checking of the pilots. As a pilot and as a QIP, I would check a young navigator, because I'm flying the aircraft and I'm watching the radar and I can see when things are going wrong. But what I was never allowed to do was to be in the back working the radar with a young pilot. And that was the only thing that as a QIP I couldn't do. I could do every other sortie. I could be in the back doing radar work with a pilot as long as it didn't involve that phase 3 stuff. So I almost got there and I enjoyed it, but that's why I stayed. stayed flying because that's why I wanted to do it. Now, fortunately, the Air Force had a system. It was originally called Specialist Aircrew, where you went on to a slightly different, and by different I mean higher pay grades for stuff, and then they changed that to Professional Aviator Spine, PAS, where you didn't get flying pay. I always used to make a big thing about this. I don't get flying pay anymore. But your basic pay is this, and more importantly, the basic pay is all pensionable. So actually, we're right. But no, I don't get flying. I don't get flying pay, and what that meant was they will keep you as long as you're medically fit in a flying. It's supposed to be a flying related appointment, not guaranteed flying, but for me it was, because they just want to use my experience and keep the guys going.
Right, I think if I was fortunate to be, I went your route.
I was never going to make squadron leader after that, and I was certainly never going to go up the ranks. But that's the choice I made.
Yeah, definitely do that.
Yeah.
And how often did you get to was it bash up the circuit and stuff like that? Was it your choice, or did you have to get permission for that?
No, not. When you say bashing up the circuit, you mean
wings back full burn? Stuff like
negative
that.
Ghost Rider, the passage full.
Nah, never had to do that.
No, we never did that. I mean, you'd come back and do circuits because we all have our continuity training, and you have to keep up the stats to keep the practice going. And if there was enough fuel, we wanted to. The navs, of course, are come on, we want to get on the ground, get the tapes, get the debrief going. You go, hang on a minute, you've had your bit. I'm doing a few. All right, okay. So look out the windows. The wife's got the washing out in the garden and stuff. So that was we would do that. I always remember Friday mornings though. I had this thing about Friday. We had a Friday morning 4-ship. And we're coming back, round about lunchtime, we're going to be finishing, give the ground crew a chance to sort the aircraft out Friday afternoon. We would do ground training. That's generally how it would work, so that there isn't a bag of bolts waiting for us on Monday morning. But if it was decent weather, and I would always, the air traffic would always bail up, because they've got continuity training as well. Any chance of doing, can we get some GCAs? And you would, okay, right. We're not charging in. We're all going to start separating and coming down, even though it's a beautiful day. Friday mornings, always refused them. I'd go negative. No, we've got to come back. This is a Friday morning 4-ship break, and so we put them into battle 4. So that's one in fighting wing there. I'd be on this side. If we're on 2-6, I'd be there put on battle left. So number 3's out there with 4 on his wing. Number 2's on my right hand side. We'd drop down to 250 feet and we'd push it up to, I just say 250 feet. The flying order book, it was something like 600 and 400. And I always got slightly confused whether it was 600 knots, 400 feet, or 400 knots and 600 feet. Honestly, gov. We'd be down, wings back at 67 and just come stonking in. It was brilliant. And then 67 wing break. In actual fact, you go hard into it, and most people would be, until they learn, when you're coming in quite fast, they immediately, when you go into a break, throttles come back, air brakes come out, and they would start to put the wings forward quite quickly, as long as the speed allowed. They were now, getting below the maximum speed for a wing sweep, so we'd put it forward. But in actual fact, you get more drag by leaving it in 67 wing. So you just keep pulling in 67 wing, and the aircraft really did slow down quite quickly. The problem was, when you got down to about 200 knots, you really did have to get the wings forward, otherwise it would start dropping very quickly. But that was the quickest way to slow it down, but it also looked the best because you stayed 67 all the way around. Whereas a lot of people, the moment the speed came down, they're getting the wings forward and the wings are coming through, and you still come in fast, but it doesn't look quite so good.
I've seen a few videos from Lucas, he's still with 67.
Because there's so much drag, it's the best way to slow the aircraft down.
Do you miss Lucas air shows? Because they were amazing.
It was strange because when I was a young lad, really enjoyed them as a customer. When you actually arrived and were on the squadron, they were really hard work, because you were there all day. You had to be there early, so you're on the base about 6:30.
Well, why did you have to get involved?
Everybody.
There was a whole base.
Team effort.
Right.
So you're on the base about 6:30. You would have duties, whatever it is. Usually as aircrew standing in front of the aircraft. If we're flying, that would be bonus. You'd roll demonstration or something like that. But generally it would be in front of the aircraft or on a stall or something like that. But at the end, you had to stay while the crowd were then put away about 5:30, 6 o'clock, everybody ushered away. There's the initial FOD plod to pick up all the rubbish.
Yeah,
so you're generally getting away maybe about 7, half 7-ish, maybe, depending on how bad it was. That was a Saturday. Sunday morning, you're back in again for a full airfield FOD plod. So you'd be broken up into teams, the airfields in sectors, and basically the whole airfield is combed for rubbish.
And that's like a massive team effort.
Yep, and it would generally be Sunday morning. You'd be finished by lunchtime.
Yeah.
But it was always a balls ache, it really was. And latterly they came up with an idea, and that was it called the Golden Bolt? And I think it was like OCNG came up with this idea. And what he had was a big nut and bolt thing that was covered in gold foil and hidden somewhere on the airfield. Right? So the person who found the golden bolt got something. I can't remember what it was, whether it was alcohol, whether it was extra leave, or whether it was a prize, a monetary prize or something. But that gave a little bit of an incentive to, like the lottery card, I want to get my numbers. Somewhere out there is and it also ensured that people were looking properly instead of just ambling along with your bin bag going, that's great, and you trip over something and you should have picked that up, And very often we're picking up stuff that wasn't even dropped at the air show. It was actually almost like an annual clean of the airfield. So to answer your question, yes, enjoyed it, but boy, was it a long day. And the day after as well.
And were you in your flight suit? Because I remember, as a kid, I was like, Dad, there's a bunny over there. And I was like, he was like, I remember that.
I have to admit, I get slightly, I say not embarrassed is the wrong word, there's a little bit, when you used to get people coming up and asking me, but I'd never ever refused it because quite often I saw myself.
Totally.
This 10-year-old wants the signature of a pilot and all the rest of it. I would never ever refuse them because, I know, I've been there.
Yeah.
I know where you are and I hope you can go where I've been.
Yeah, I remember as a kid they were just the best, and I was like, like celebrities, footballers, when I was always like, oh, there's aircrew. I was like, can I go and get a photo with them, or even an autograph? I remember once I think it was an F-3 guy, I can't remember, obviously I was young, and I was like, can you sign this photo? And he was like, really? He was actually shocked, and I was like, and I felt embarrassed, and he was like, okay. But as a kid, you just like,
absolutely.
Like astronaut almost.
Yeah, I did feel that way, that it's a bit, I'm only doing my job, it's just me, I'm not. But, that was fine, and that's what it was all about as well. And even more so when got involved in the University Air Squadron, there's much more engagement, because while it isn't officially, in all practical terms, the University Air Squadron is a recruiting machine. Trying to interest, and not just for flying, across the board, all the disciplines in the Air Force, to try and I say the Air Force, primarily the Air Force, but if you're not going to join the Air Force, can be interested in the Army or Navy. Any of the graduates coming in, we're trying to bring them in, and our focus was on the Air Force. So it's much more public engagement, whether it's an air display, East Fortune, we go there, or on Remembrance Day coming up, very important. You see University Air Squadrons out there, again, just young people, and they thought, what's all that about, and hopefully people who are going to university think, right, okay.
Yeah. And I don't know if you can answer this. Who do you think were the best crew for the F3 display, like over the years? Do you have one in mind that you thought that was the best?
I knew a lot of them. In fact, I knew most of them. And they all. You would think, well, display it must be the same as next year. Last year, next year's the same. No, they would be able to shoot something slightly different. I mean, there are basic manoeuvres. You can't turn it into an F-16 next year, so it's going to be pretty much the same. Probably one of the most spectacular was a guy called Fred Grundy.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot. Yeah,
and Martin Parker was his backseater. I knew Fred. Martin Parker's a good friend. I've not spoken to him for a long time. But he was his backseater, and they had the Raspberry Ripple. Remember that colour scheme? Yeah,
that was great.
That was their one. Yeah. They did a good display. Yeah. And another two, both good friends of mine, Dick O'Moyes, who's out the Air Force now, and his backseater Gaz Littlechild, who's still in the Air Force. they put on a good show as well. They were very good. They had the one that had a big red chevron on the tail. It was 56 Squadron.
Yes.
But there was a big red chevron
Yes.
on the tail. I think that was their sort of, and they might even have had a red. Oh, in fact, they then eventually got a red spine with flames on the tail.
Oh yes, they did, didn't you? Yes, yeah.
That was their sort of era. They were too, but I mean, all the guys were good, even when it was away. You know, Leeming and what have you. They took turns at taking on the display, and it was a bit of a load on the squadron when resources were getting low. Okay. There was an aircraft.
Yeah.
The display aircraft was not used regularly, or regular flying, to keep it serviceable and to keep the fatigue down, because of course fatigue consumption was quite high on displays. So in order to keep this, and fatigue monitoring started right at the beginning of the F3's life, so they could last. They really did, start to manage it quite heavily, and it paid results.
Yeah.
It paid dividends because the aircraft did last, and so the engineers did get it right. But they were very careful, and so the aircraft that were display aircraft were given an easy time during the week, and then one, they're serviceable, and two, they haven't had their wings pulled off during the week, so they're going to get their wings pulled off during the weekend.
Yeah.
The crews as well needed time off during the week, so they then weren't available because they were flying at the weekend. So there was holes appearing in the squadron resources. So it was quite a heavy hit on the squadron that was doing the display each season. And eventually it fell back on 56.
Yeah, 56, yeah.
Because it was easier, we had more crews, we had more aircraft, it was less of a hit than it would have been on the front line.
Yeah.
Although the front line crews liked doing it, it really was hard work for them.
Yeah. Another kind of diverting here, but why do you think the F3 was never seen as iconic as the F4? Because no matter what you say about the F, everyone's like, "Oh, you like that?" It's just like no one seems to like it. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It baffles me. Why shouldn't it have that status like the?
I don't know. I think it was the way it was born, and the fact that it is a compromise, because it is. They talk about. It was, MRCA, multi-role combat aircraft. No, it wasn't. It was designed as a low-level strike bomber, and we will create an air defence variant, ADV, out of it. It wasn't optimised for all the things the Phantom could do. Now, the Phantom was proper multi-role. It could do all those roles brilliantly. And in fact, I remember at Coningsby in the simulator build, as you came in, there was a picture and it said the original MRCA, and it actually was a painting of a mosquito. And you go, yeah, that's right, the mosquito could do a heck of a lot of stuff. And then beyond that, you would then go, what else could do a heck of a lot of stuff? Well, the Phantom could actually do it well. Pretty much like an F-16 can do stuff, and the F-18 stuff can do a multi-role. Tornado, that was a ground attack aircraft. That's what it did. Right, well, let's try and make an air defence aircraft out of it. Okay, we'll give it slightly more powerful engines, better wing. No, we can't change the wings. It doesn't need a tail as big as that because it's got longer to get the missiles on the belly. You're not having a smaller tail. It was that sort of thing. So it was a compromise. It wasn't a pure fighter. Then you go back to what we were talking about the other day with the problem with the radar and all that sort of stuff, and it just had a difficult childhood that it never was able to shake off. And of course, because it was a Phantom, I go back to talking about cars and car enthusiasts, and I'm sure there'll be people who have owned D-type Jags and then see the new Ferraris coming in and going, that's rubbish, bloody rubbish. Yeah. No, it's not a classic. That's not a sports car. That's a sports car. It's that allegiance, etc. And I'm afraid it's stuck. And it was never able to shine as much as it should have done.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is down to, now I'm not going to say ignorance, that's unfair, less than full knowledge of what the aircraft was like. Yeah. And whether that is other aviators or enthusiasts that perhaps didn't know how good the aircraft was.
But maybe it's like also a generation thing, because I'm sure people, you know, when the Phantom was overtaking the Lightning, people were like, oh, that's not a proper fighter. So maybe it is because
Lightning's a classic as well. I mean, people just wax lyrical about the Lightning.
Yeah.
Oh, it can go really fast, it can go really high for about 10 minutes. Yep. What's the radar like? It's crap. It was a pulse radar that could maybe see 20 miles. It had 2 missiles that you had to be in the stern to have a really decent chance of a quiet. I mean, it was Cold War, 1950s. By the 1980s, it was a relic. Looked good on the airfield, getting airborne, bro, the rest of it, sports car, operationally, crap. Yeah. Absolutely crap. Should have been retired years ago. There'll be Lightning people watching this going, oh my God.
Yeah.
But it was true.
Yeah, I think it's like kind of, you know, big standout thing was first Mach 2 fighter, that kind of thing.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I mean, it was spectacular as an airframe to fly around. Yeah. But operationally in the 80s, much use as a chocolate fireguard. Really was. I mean, you know, just... And I'll have a go now, because it's another favourite of mine, the bloody Sea Harrier. The Mark I Sea Harrier. And there's a certain squadron boss who then wrote books and is infamous for thinking that the Sea Harrier was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Yeah. And it's a lot of horse. If you read his book, particularly about the Falklands War, and people know who I'm talking about, it is rubbish. And he's, you know, he decries the Air Force saying they shouldn't have been involved and all that sort of stuff. Waste of petrol, fuel, getting that Vulcan to drop 1 bomb on the runway and all that sort of stuff. Should have been more Harrier, Sea Harrier, but rubbish. They didn't know how to use the Sidewinder. No head-on acquisitions with a 9L. Everyone was round the back. He glossed over the fact he nearly got shot himself by not doing a belly check as he did a 180-degree turn and roll out in front of an enemy aircraft. He reports it by saying, and my wingman shot the guy down behind me. Yeah, but why is the guy behind? Oh no, you won't admit to his own failings. A rubbish radar. Yeah. It was a rubbish. Now, the Mark II. Oh yeah. Mark II, completely different. The Sea Vixen and the AMRAAM. Whoa. Now you're talking. Now you're talking a proper platform. But
surprised you actually admit you like the Harrier here.
No, well the FRS-1 was like the Lightning. Yeah. Except it was Navy, and the Navy thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Yeah. I know what the greatest thing since sliced bread. It was 892 Squadron on the old Dart Royal with the Phantoms. That's what they should have had in the Falklands. And the war would have been completely different if the old Dart Royal was still in service.
That's crazy. I think we had Seaborne Phantoms.
Gannets.
Yeah, Gannets, yeah.
To do the job. And then Buccaneers to go and lay bombs down where you needed it. It would have been a completely different thing. Not saying the guys didn't do a good job down there, but the weapon systems they had to deal with, they had to do the job with, were far less capable than they would have been had it happened 2 years earlier. And even the RAF Harrier boys did a great job. Yeah. But I'm sorry, Buccaneers would have done an even better job.
Yeah, the books were good, weren't they?
And the air-to-air kills would have gone through the roof if 892 had been there.
I was going to ask you as well, did you ever get the chance, I can't remember if I asked you this, Roy, but did you ever get the chance to fly your GR1 or GR4? Did you ever get
No.
Or backseat ride?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
No. I don't know if anybody... I know there was some of the early F3 guys had done a tour on the GR to try and get tornado experience, particularly front seaters. I can think of a number of front seaters who had done a tour on the GR and they were air defence pilots, so like Phantom pilots or Lightning pilots who had then gone to the Tornado just to learn Tornado. So they had experience when they came. In fact, one of them, I think, was Pax. I may be wrong.
Yeah, Tony Paxton. Yeah, he went from GR1 to F3.
Yep. Yeah. And there was another Jimmy Davidson, Jimmy D. He again did some GR time, and that was to give them Tornado experience. And latterly, there was a lot of the backseaters. I don't know about front seaters, but certainly backseaters who went to the GR.
Okay.
When we downside. Now, most of the front seaters are thinking, if we're staying in, I want Typhoon, and they got Typhoon. Yeah. Back seaters are going, I want to fly, and what's left? Yeah. Well, I tell you what, the GRs need you. So some went to Lossiemouth and joined the squadron. Some went to Marham. I know quite a few of the back seaters, and in fact, the chap I've mentioned already, Gaz Littlechild, he went and was the XO on 31, I think. So he did a couple of tours down at Marham. He's now higher up and doing other things now.
Yeah.
But he was one example. And I know a couple of QYs as well that went onto the GRs.
Yeah.
And got more flying time.
Yeah, because I thought we'd like kind of crossbreed there, or just get experiences.
That experience trade-off only happened at the beginning when you were desperately trying to build a core of experience. But other than that, no.
Okay, right. Yeah. But did you? I probably asked you, but like reunions and what are the funnest one? Is it more squadron or type based that are like quite good?
Well, 43 have probably one of the strongest associations, and they have an annual reunion. Can be usually down in London. 2016 was the 100th anniversary of the squadron, so it was up at Stirling, and that's always strong, and that's good because you've got aircrew, ground crew from across the ages. There are two reunions that I am aware of. One happens in November, and it's the thinly disguised Phantom piss-up. So it's for Phantom crews in London, an undisclosed location. I couldn't possibly say where it was. And usually in May, there is the F-4 one at another undisclosed location in London somewhere. And it's really just open house. The pub knows that they're going to have a lot of people coming in, but it's not a set piece. It says, hostilities begin at, and the pub shuts at.
Oh, so it's not like an organised do.
You just wander in.
Right.
And it's all casual, and you see old mates, and there's people talking, and people have to leave, and other people come in. That's the way it works, and that's good. That's good.
Yeah, I've seen a few videos online. It looks fun. Like it looks like they get a bit hairy at the end.
The Phantom ones tend to do the old songs and that sort of thing. There's more tradition with the Phantom one. The F-4 one, because of younger generation, it's more just a big happy hour, really.
Yeah.
And the trouble with it is, you wander in, you go, oh yeah, I'll go and talk, and then you're looking at, I must go and talk, I must go, and you never do, because you never get time. And by the time you go I must go and speak to Ian so and so, and you walk 2 meters and you meet somebody else. You never get there. You spend all day, and you think chatting, and you think, I must be pissed at the end. And actually, you're not. You've been there 6 hours, and you've probably had 3 pints or something like that, because there's so much chat going on.
What did the other people like? Is the civvies in the pub thing? Well, like, what's going on here?
I don't really notice that, and I had to think the numbers tend to make people think. I don't think they're going, oh, military, because it's not overtly, and they think, oh, busy pub, we'll maybe go somewhere else. So I'm sure they're there, but normally you would be going 80-90% of the people in the pub are to do with whatever the reunion is, whether it's Phantom or Tornado.
So it's just like as you say, you just turn up at the pub this time. I thought it'd be more organised, like you hire the venue out or that kind of thing. Oh, you want that? Yeah. So all right. So let's talk about obviously all the squadrons and stuff like that. Did you actually talk to each other on a weekly basis, see like what they're up to? So we talked. Oh, you would. So it wasn't you weren't separated in that sense.
No. And that became more and more important as the numbers of aircraft in the United Kingdom reduced, and principally we're talking about the Americans as they started to lower the numbers and the number of available of ground, ground attack, etc. So it was a job on the squadron for 1 or 2 of the guys. They were known as AFFIL officers, so affiliation training, and they would be constantly on the phone in the early days, and then of course you'd be able to electronically advertise, put out bids and say, we're looking to do, a pair or 3 for 4 for training against such and such. Have you got anything next week? And their equivalent of fill officers would talk to the programmers and say, look, 43 are wanting to do some work. Yeah. And they would say, well, maybe Wednesday we might be able to get something. And it would be effectively horse trading.
Yeah.
Because, of course, the other side would want something out of it as well, The concept of red air and blue air was very late coming to the Air Force. Are you aware of red and blue air?
Yeah,
and that
red the bad guys.
They are the bad guys, but it was not understood by the RAF for a very long time. The experts at it live at Nellis Air Force Base.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
The aggressor squadron at Nellis are the experts. Because Red Air, yeah, they're the bad guys, and the Air Force used to think, we used to think, yeah, it's your turn to stand there and be punched. You know, you haven't got the same weapons, and we're going to win. And you'll get a turn next time. That's not how Red Air works.
No.
That's not how Red Air should work. Red Air control it, everything. If they're doing it properly, Blue Air talk to Red Air and say, on this mission, these are our training objectives. This is what we want to learn. This is what we want to achieve. Red Air then say, right, what threat level do you want? How hard do you want it? What sort of tactics do you want us to give you?
Mimic something else.
So we'll pretend that we are somewhere from the Middle East, perhaps, or somewhere from North Africa, perhaps, or somewhere east of Poland, perhaps, you know, wherever you happen to be, and that aircraft type, and more importantly, the weapons. So you will simulate, and it's quite difficult for Red Air to simulate a weapon when you're not carrying a training aid that actually gives you the launch success zones of that weapon. You've got to do it mentally. You have a crib and say, we're going to be pretending to be this missile today. And so compared to the missile I'm actually carrying, the launch ranges, min range and max range are. And you have to look at it on a bit of paper and then not fire at the symbology that you're presented with, but actually modify that.
Yeah.
And then you've got time of flight. It might be a faster missile, it might be a slower missile. So you know, you'll see the time of flight of your missile that you're firing, whether in the old days it was Skyflash or AMRAAM, and you then have to change that to represent the missile type you're simulating.
Does that go with G as well, so you can only pull on a certain amount of G?
Yes, funny you should say that. A classic was the MiG-23.
Yeah.
MiG-23 couldn't fire under a lot of G, and it couldn't fire, something to do with its wing sweep as well.
It couldn't, I couldn't turn and sweep, I think.
That's what it was.
I think that was correct.
Yeah. This is intelligence, but it's old intelligence.
Yeah,
now,
I've heard it, so.
Yeah, exactly. So things like that. So if we were simulating MiG-23s, we would have to do that so we didn't manoeuvre as hard. We generally knew the G limits, so that sort of thing. So you already start to see that Red Air is not quite as straightforward. You are trying to provide a threat that Blue Air want to train against. The next thing that happens, and this is real A-level stuff, and this is where Nellis were brilliant at it, is, real time during the fight. If it's not going well for Blue Air, Red Air should be able to tone it down. Because there is no point in Red Air going in and just throwing Blue Air all over the place and going, well, you mucked that up. We've just wasted a sortie. We've got aircraft up there that's cost X amount of man hours and money, and we got it wrong, but you saw us getting it wrong. Now that's where Red Air, the aggressors, are really good, because they will go, this is not working, right, let's take it down to level 2. And everybody on Red Air knows what level 2 is, and they basically back off.
Right.
And give Blue Air a chance to get forward. And then in the debrief, they can explain, but at least Blue Air gets something out of it. That's how Red Air, Blue Air should work.
Yeah.
And it came very, very late to the Air Force. And to be honest, right now, I'm not sure if the Air Force has still got it. They brought in 100 Squadron as the aggressors. They've got 9 Squadron now.
Yeah,
Is it 9?
We always get is it 9 or 12? I can't remember. Is it 9?
I think it's 9 and 12 are Middle East training.
Yeah, is 12 the one with the fox?
Yeah.
That's 12, yeah, and the bats are 9, yeah. So
yes.
Yeah,
I think it's 9 that are the aggressor. I hope that 9 Squadron have gripped it like this. If they haven't, they need to talk to people, and I know a couple of people who have had exchange tours on the aggressor squadrons.
Because they had a Typhoon painted on all black, didn't they?
That's right.
Yeah, so I think they were kind of trying.
Yeah, that's how it should work, but the Air Force was very, very slow picking up the idea of Red Air, Blue Air. Red Air, it was almost like a challenge to your ego. I can still win this with one arm behind my back. That's not what Red Air's about.
Yeah,
it's much more subtle than that.
Yeah, it's there to learn, I suppose.
But to go back to your original point, there was an awful lot of talking, to make things work on a weekly basis. But it was down at squadron level. Unless it was a big exercise, Joint Warrior was the name of that exercise I was trying to get a name of up at Lossy.
Yeah.
about 40 minutes ago. We're talking about it anyway. Unless it's an integrated exercise on a week-by-week basis, group used to sit back and leave the squadrons to work it out.
Yeah.
You know, because the squadrons wrote their own programme to achieve the syllabus and the training of their individuals. So some week they wouldn't need a fill. It would be basic radar and stuff like that. There'd be night flying. And it'd be the same with tanking. You'd put in the bids to go tanking. You might not get it to suit what you wanted. So you weren't bidding for a tanker every day or every week. Mm-hmm. So it was all very much, you know, week by week. And that was these guys' jobs to... Mm-hmm. The programmers would take the input from the flight commanders, say, this is what we need to achieve. Okay, right, we'll write this right. A fill, guys, we're looking for a fill on Thursday and Friday morning. See what you can get. Yeah. And I remember doing it. You're on the phone, you just dial a mate. You got anything going? No, right, we'll try the next one. You get anything going? No, and you keep going till you can get something. Mm-hmm. And you say, right, oh, well, this is who you need to talk to. Well, let's put it in the diary. Good.
Yeah.
Not efficient, but that's the way we did it.
Yeah, exactly. But like how did the locals find like the noise and of like Lucas at the time with the F-3s and everything? Because it seems like Americans seem to be very patriotic and they're very, but we seem to be a bit more reserved. Obviously we're British, but how did the locals find this?
I've got a grin on my face because back in the 1980s, the 90s, etc., it was fine. It was fine. Yeah. They dealt with we didn't try and make a nuisance of ourselves. The weekends, no circuits for things like that.
Yeah.
Light aircraft, the circuit switched to the south at the weekends. You would think, well, that puts it close to St Andrews. Yeah, it puts it over the river, but it takes it away from Lucas Village, which have had aircraft going over them all the time. So we'd do our best. Mm. But people tolerated it. Mm-hmm. As the number of aircraft went, and a reason they tolerated it was the amount of money we put into the local business.
Right.
All the way from housing to the butcher to the pubs. There's money to be made from the military. Mm-hmm. As the number of aircraft went down, so did tolerance. And the first place it appeared was in the borders. Mm. The number of noise complaints went up as the number of aircraft that were actually flying went down. Because people got used to the quiet, and then suddenly, there is that's a bloody noise. Yes,
kicking off about it.
Yeah, and we got to the stage at the end, fast jet operations at Lucas, where we are actually warning people we're going to night fly, and we're only doing it for a short time, and it's for a very important, aircrew continuity. What? Sorry, why are we pandering to the locals?
Yeah.
With night flying? Because they will just complain because they get used to the quiet. And it happens now when you get exercises coming in. Oh, it's in the paper. Yeah. Oh, there's going to be nightfall. There's going to be this and all the rest of it. We're trying not to. Come on, people.
But they must know if you're going to move around the area. It's there's a fast jet base there. It's not like it's not like a surprise for them, surely.
You would be gobsmacked when Leeming got reactivated, having stopped being a jet province base and reactivated in the 1988. When 11 Squadron moved in, the number of people and even the noise footprint to get double glazing, triple glazing paid for by the MOD to get the noise level down. Wow. There was still a lot of protests, and it was protests from people who had no financial interest in the military being there. You're not getting any protests from the local pub owners and the local shop owners. Yeah. It's people who just live there. Now, same thing happened. The people in Balmurrow, which is the village just to the west of Lucas on the hillside. If you've got an east-facing window, when you look out, there is a very large runway pointing towards you. Guess what?
No, you think, what's that?
Yeah.
The
best one is Earl's Hall Castle, which is right in the north edge of Lucas Airfield, halfway down the airfield, hard on the boundary. Mm-hmm. In the 1980s, it changed hands, or it was going to change hands, and the then owners got in contact with the station commander and said, we have people coming round Wednesday afternoon who possibly might want to buy the castle. Could you possibly stop flying?
No.
Correct. Yeah, you're going to hide the fact that just over your fence is a rather large military airfield. Oh, come on, people. Yeah. But it's amazing.
That should be a selling point.
Yeah, it's amazing how the general populace's tolerance drops as the frequency of flying drops.
That's really surprising.
Yeah, and you know, the typhoons come down and do work at Lookers. You know, they maybe do practice diversions because, of course, the air traffic at Lookers still need to keep their currency.
Yeah.
So they're looking for GCAs and in the circuit and all the rest.
It's an army base now, is that?
It is, but the airfield is still active.
Right, yeah.
It's an RAF airfield, but an army camp. And of course the University Air Squadron still flies from there.
Of course, yeah.
But you will find typhoons come down. Haven't been so often, but it used to be Friday morning. There would always be a KC 135 out of Mildenhall would come up and do circuits.
Oh, right.
You know, Quid 86 or whoever it is would be around, and so they'd be doing stuff. So there is still stuff going on, but people's tolerance of it, so bloody jets, etc., because they get used to peace and quiet, you know. And then, of course, when the balloon goes up, where's the Air Force? Where's the Air Force? Why are they not doing, you know? No, you know, exactly. Low flying was a classic, you know, this bloody low flying, etc., etc. Look what's happening in Libya, look what's happening in the Middle East, come on, where are they?
Yeah.
Well, how the heck are we supposed to be able to do this if we haven't practiced, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
they want the cake and eat it, don't they, really?
Yeah.
But I think I've heard many occasions that the people or the residents in the Falklands loved it. Was this true?
Completely different.
Yeah.
Yep. After the war, the British forces were top. And where are we? 30, 35 years, or let's do the maths. God, it's nearly 40 years, isn't it? 82, it's got to be nearly 40 years. Next year it'll be 40 years.
Yeah.
40 years later, British military forces are still the top.
Yeah.
They love it. And it's not just for the money, it is for what they did. And that's completely, the Falkland Islanders were so appreciative of what the British forces did for them. It's never been forgotten, it's never been diminished.
Yeah.
And you're right, going down there, flying, they are totally welcoming.
Yeah.
And one time I was down there, I took a pair round, and you just go, we called it a bimble. You take a little bimble round, and you basically just fly the flag round the islands, etc. And round we went, all these places, got back down on the ground, and the boss said, "Oh, Roy, just had a I've had a complaint from Saunders Island." Oh, he said, "Yeah," and I went, "No, we didn't go to Saunders Island." They said, "Yeah, that's what the complaint was. They saw you turn 2 miles to the south. They phoned up and said, 'What's wrong with us?'"
That's a great complaint.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I went, "Oh right, now I understand."
Next time
Next time, make sure you go there because they felt left out, you know.
Yeah,
that's how the Falkland Islanders work, and they still do, as far as I know. Completely different attitude.
Yeah, do you think it's a different between, you know, the British public and the American public, because they're very, as you say, patriotic. They love it.
The Americans are over the top for my liking.
I probably agree.
They're over the top, but they hold their military in very high regard. And where it came, the biggest contrast for me was when I came home from the Second Gulf War, and the reactions of people. Some people were saying, "Oh, you're back, that was great," and all the rest of it. And then others, usually who didn't know so well or didn't know at all, would say, "Oh, you in the military, you were out in Iraq." Oh, you know, because you were then getting the elements of the government, the Blair government, and what was known and what wasn't known and what was made up, and Bush and all the rest of it, and you were getting tarred with that brush, as opposed to, well, hang on a minute, I was a serviceman, I'm not saying I didn't know what I was doing, but I did take the Queen's shilling, and the Queen wanted me to be out there to do the job, and that's what I did. And yet you're turning and criticising me for that. No, I'm not the one that should be criticised. Go high. They made the decisions.
Exactly,
and so I did see a difference, and you wouldn't ever get that in the States, I don't think, by military that went out there.
Because I used to live, I lived in Arizona for 2.5 years, and they have Luke Air Force Base there, where even this is how patriotic they are. So I was between 10 to 13, and the schools, and even their schools, you know how we have forms here?
Yeah.
They have forms. And I was in the F-16 form. They even named it after aircraft. That's how patriotic they were.
Yeah.
I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah. There's another incident. I had reason many years ago now to go out to Nellis to be involved in an accident investigation. There was an RAF pilot was involved. He was all right, but he was involved in a crash. And I went out as an observer to make sure that he was all right, and if it was going to turn ugly for him, i.e. he was going to be implicated at all, I was going to send up a distress flare and the team from Washington would come out and take over lawyers and all that. But I just needed to be the man on the ground reporting back what was going on. In actual fact, I became part of the investigation board and I started to unofficially give advice on what we thought happened. But the point was, I was going out flying Civ Air from Edinburgh to Newark to McCarran, right? When I got to, and they'd only booked one way because we didn't know how long the accident investigation was going to take. So when I got to Edinburgh and talking to the immigrant, because in those days they did US immigration at Edinburgh Airport before you got on the aircraft. And they go, where's your return flight? And I said, I don't have one. I said, well, you can't, we're not going to allow you to go into the country, you know, because you're not got an exit day, etc. And even though I explained what was going on, they went, oh no, no, that's not going to. So eventually, don't know who spoke to who, but they allowed me on the aircraft. Right, get to Newark and you meet the passport control guy, and I look at my passport and he looks at me and he said, where are you going? I said, I'm going on to McCarran. And he said, when are you leaving the country? And I said, here we go. I said, I don't have an exit date. He said, well, that's not possible, etc., etc. And then the moment I said, yeah, I'm actually going to Nellis Air Force Base because I'm in the Air Force. He looked at me, he said, sir, are you travelling on orders? And I went, yeah, I've got a NATO travel order here. And I pulled it out. And he said, right, that's fine, sir. Don't need any of that. Don't get out. You just go straight down there, show them this, Wow. Suddenly I had a first class pass because they realised I'm military on duty. And I should have highlighted that at the start. But the American system, military on duty, straight through, no problem at all. And they didn't care that I didn't have a return flight because they understood that it wasn't going to be, you know, forever, and I would know when, you know, at some point. And that's all I did was when it was coming to an end, I phoned back home, can you book me a flight home to, and it all worked. Because the Americans love the military.
Yeah, they really do, which is a good thing. But so did you ever hang around with any like the F-15 guys in happy hour? Did they ever come over and you know have a few drinks together?
Only when we were on detachment or they were on attachment to us. You know, they would have a detachment in. There was one time, again, Phantom's first tour. We'd been on a lockdown exercise. We used to do, again, I'll go back to the station commander whose name I will not mention. He had this thing that we had to do a full 3-day lockdown exercise, as in we're staying in the hardened accommodation, air raids, every month.
Christ.
It was called a Scott ADEX, and we did this every month. We got bloody good at operating in hardened accommodation, but my God. Anyway, this thing finished on Friday lunchtime. We're going to the mess. They'd said they put a barrel on. Great. So we all pile in the bus. And we come round the corner, Armoury Corner at Lookers. We look to the west, down the flight line. Blow me, is there not 6 F-15s and a KC-10? Where the bloody hell did they come from? As we're driving along, I look at the tail and I went, that's the Louisiana National Guard.
Right.
Those F-15s. And it was. What it was, they had, and they'd go their own KC-10, they had gone to Keflavik on the detachment, but they decided that Keflavik wasn't much fun. So their squadron boss looked around and went, well, where else can we go? How about down the UK? Lutchers. Lutchers. That's a fighter base. That's a good place. So let's go.
Yeah.
And Jazz formation, 1 to 7, where Jazz 7 was the KC-10, off they went, and they arrived at Lookers. For us to come into the mess, and there's bottles of Jack Daniels and all sorts of stuff set up because they understood what had just happened.
Yeah.
We're coming, and man, was I got my first American flying suit that day.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, because we basically met this guy. We got out into the corridor. That'll do. You know, we come back into the bar with our own other flying suit on. Yeah. So that was an example, and we had a detachment for a couple of weeks down at Lakenheath to work with the Eagles down there. And so that's really the only time you'd get the unless we're on a flag exercise or something like that. But routinely, no. Yeah. The only F-15 or American guys I would get in contact with would be the guys who are on exchange with the squadrons.
So what was like you said that you mentioned there, like Lakenheath, what did they think of the F3? Was there a lot of banter? They were like, oh.
Yeah, there was, until you start to prove yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah, we still, they had a better radar. The F-15 was a better radar, always was, medium PRF that had. And the performance of the aircraft, it could go higher, faster, which means the missile had more energy. Even though we had the same missile, it was going to be starting with more energy because it's been launched at a higher altitude, faster speed, which meant it could go further, do more at the end. So that was the advantage. The disadvantage, well, can you think of the disadvantage? Where's the weak point of the F-15 versus the F-3? Where do you think the weak point is?
Well, I feel like I'm in school. Probably down low. Is it not?
No. I'm thinking about the whole thing, the package. If you look at an F-15 versus an F-3, where do you think the weak point is of the F-15 compared to the F-3?
Probably the size when it turns.
No, you're thinking too hard.
Oh yes,
count them.
Yeah, you got 2 seats. They got 1.
Two brains versus 1.
Yeah,
single seat in the F-15. That's the weak point. Beat the man. Doesn't matter how good the machine is, and that's how we used to get them. If we could do enough so that he's trying to fly, work the radar, blah blah blah. Oh, we've gone out of scan. Where are we? And the way the Americans were, it was so predictable. Number 1 is your ace. Number 3 is your junior ace. 2 and 4 are cannon fodder. They're the boys who are going, I'll stick, search and report. So if you could identify 2 and 4, they were the weak points, and you'd invariably get into them. And so suddenly there's not 4 of them anymore, there's only 2 of them, etc. That's how we used to do it.
And they wouldn't change their tactics much?
No, that's how they trained. Their number 4 and their number 2 were always the junior guys.
Right.
And number 4 would be working 90% just staying in formation and staying visual. Never mind shooting anything. I'm generalising now. But that's how we used to do it. The weak point of the 16, 18 and the 15 was 1 person in the cockpit. And that's, you would just try and overload them.
Unless you went up against the E models, but I'm guessing they didn't do much air-to-air.
No, that was later from my time, so I can't really comment on that.
Yeah.
It never really changed. No matter how good the F3 was, we still had to resort to our bag of tricks. Old age and treachery will triumph over youth and inexperience, as they say. Yeah. Or youth and exuberance, was it? I can't remember.
So yeah, if you were, is there anything you probably look back in your career and wish you did something different, or you're happy with everything you've done? I
wish I had an exchange tour. I did try and get go for the exchange tour in Australia down at Williamtown on the F-18.
Yeah. That
would have been brilliant. For most of my career, I was always wary of my family and trying to time it for the family. And that one would have worked out in terms of schooling age for the kids and what have you. Didn't come my way. It was one of the other QY's pilots that got it. So that's probably my biggest regret, other than not being a squadron leader, QY leader. Other than that, no. It was just as I wished. Talking about the family, again, comes from OEU times. I was asked by the representatives of the Saudi Air Force, who were over as we were selling them the latest radar, and was flying with them, and they were offering me, Mr. Roy, if you want to come across to the kingdom and all the rest of it, I could have gone across there, and plenty of the guys have done, and you make a shed load of money.
Yeah, I've heard
a shed load of money. Why do you get that money? Why do they pay? But why do they have to pay you that money? Because you have to work with the Saudis.
Yeah, that's the
moral
dilemma, isn't it?
Yes, you have to live the way they say. And my wife would not go with me to Saudi Arabia. She did not want to have to do and live the way that they would demand a woman to live, and we weren't going to subject the kids to it. So money didn't mean that much to me, that I was going to be away for 2 or 3 years away from my family. I didn't want it. So that's another case where I turned something down. I said, no, I'm not going to Saudi Arabia to do that. Family mean too much to me.
Absolutely, yeah. So I will wrap up this Q&A. How would you sum up the F3 in your own words? Like, what would you best describe the aircraft?
I would prefer to talk about it in its end state rather than it was at the beginning. It was a long road. It took a long time to get to where it should have been. It also suffered from not getting money spent on it. And it wasn't unique. There was, all platforms were desperate for money. There was not enough money to go round. But the 2010 F3 was extremely capable aircraft with more capability waiting if they'd allowed it to be developed. I enjoyed it. It was a nice aircraft to fly. And I do remember, particularly towards the end, just going east out of Lookers, going to do a standard intercept. I'd be sitting there when it's all sorted out, we're just transiting. I remember telling myself frequently, looking at the cockpit and going, appreciate this, because this isn't going to last forever. Just appreciate where you are right now and what you're doing. Don't take it for granted. And I never did. And I'm glad I told myself that, because it doesn't last forever for anybody. But the aircraft, I think it was hard done by at the end. It was a lot better than many people give it credit for.
Yeah. And just look at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go. Well, Roy, thank you very much for inviting me to your house. So thank you very much. Cheers.
Cheers.